Ray, you pointed out a very important point that Russia doesn't need to go nuclear because they're winning. But in the case of Israel right now in the Middle East, we know they're not winning, they're losing in the conflict. That's why the situation is so serious. And we know they don't have any sort of wisdom that Russia has. They may go nuclear. How do you find the problem that is emerging in the Middle East?
Well, I'm worried sick. People talk about the Samson option, and I could refer you to, I think it's First Kings of the Bible, where Samson is captured by the Philistines, I guess, and rather than, he pulls the pillars of the temple down, kills himself as well as everybody else. That's the Samson option. Cy Hirsch wrote a book about it. Now, would the Israelis resort to that? We know they have nuclear weapons. In extremis, would they use them? Now, if you're talking about people like Netanyahu and some of the rabid people he has around him, I would dare say that you would have to guess the answer is probably yes. They probably would use them. Now, you don't want to rely on guesses by McGovern. So I did a little research on this. There's one military historian, military advisor that the Israelis and the U.S. intelligence and military honor or respect more than any others. His name is Martin van Crefeld. Now, he's a Jewish guy. He was born in the Netherlands, therefore the name, but he's been in Israel since he was 2 or so. And he's quite an accomplished military historian. So I looked up what van Crefeld has said here. And let's see, where is it? He wrote a book called The Transformation of War. Required reading among U.S. Army officers. Required reading by an Israeli military analyst? Yes, right next to Sun Tzu and von Clausewitz. Okay? Now, this is what he said. Martin van Crefeld. He said this 20 years ago, but it's been consistent Israeli thinking. Our armed forces have the capability to take the world down with us. And I can assure you that that will happen before Israel goes under. Samson option. We will take the world down with us. Now, as I say, van Crefeld has been looked at with great respect by U.S. colonels and all those kinds of people. I want to tell you that he was also pretty sensible in weighing how stupid U.S. military put a kind of human face on him, because this is what he said about the invasion, the British-American invasion of Iraq in 2003. 2 years later, van Crefeld made headlines that the 2003 invasion of Iraq was the most foolish, quote, the most foolish war since Emperor Augustus in 9 BC sent his legions into Germany and lost them, period, end quote. All right? The most foolish war. So the guy's got his head screwed on, right? He's an Israeli, and he's telling us, it's likely that they will resort to using nuclear weapons if Israel goes down. I think those were his words. So, yeah, am I worried? Of course I'm worried. Are people counseling caution? I mean, Netanyahu, for lots of reasons, and his right-wing associates seem impervious to caution. And what they're trying to do now, of course, as I said before, is to get involved in the kind of situation with not only Hamas but Hezbollah, and get in such dire straits that the United States Armed Forces will have to come to his aid. And people say, well, that's foolish, that's crazy. Crazy like a fox. There's just a couple of months now left before the election. The Israel lobby and the donor class are so powerful that my guess is that sly like the fox would apply here, that Netanyahu, expecting fully that the U.S. couldn't possibly let him not succeed, or at least let him be defeated, that they would jump in. And there we have the U.S. involved in this thing in a military way. You have Russia now supporting Iran with, by recent reports, anti-aircraft, I was going to say artillery, that's passé, missiles, missile systems of great sophistication. Other things that have no doubt come down on those IL-76s, IL-96s, and Shoigu, Shoigu arrived there in Tehran in a very demonstrative way. This is only done when the Russians are convinced that, number one, it's necessary, and number two, they're going to be supporting a winner. Okay? Now, I go back a ways, right? That comes from Vietnam. The Russians are very chary about the prospects for the Viet Cong, for the communists in Vietnam. And then they watched for a couple of years, okay? And then when they were convinced that the U.S. was making a terrible mistake by continuing to try to beat this national movement, then they came in big time. They sent Kosygin down to visit Hanoi. He was the premier, the premier at the time, and they promised some goods. Surface-to-air missiles in those days, SAM-1s and SAM-2s and SAM-3, they didn't make a big difference. They didn't shoot down too many U.S. planes, but they were there. So the point is simply, once the Russians became convinced that it was not only kind of necessary to protect their image as a protector of all communists, but also safe, okay? The Viet Cong going to win, okay? So this was a smart move on their part, and it turned out to be a smart move, because whereas before they had sold the Ho Chi Minh and the Vietnamese communists down the river at Geneva in 1954, here they came in with some help, some military help, not as much as the Chinese provided, but at least they saved face, and more important, they were convinced that it was necessary for their image and that it was safe because the VC would win at the end. I suggest that when Shoigu was sent down by Putin, now Shoigu and Putin are best friends. I mean, they go fishing together. There are all kinds of photos about the hunting together, in their big hunting suits and all. So Shoigu, who was defense minister and now is the equivalent of Tony Blinken, not Tony Blinken, but Jacob Sullivan. I mean, NVIDIA's comparisons are NVIDIA's, but anyhow, he's the national security advisor for all intents and purposes. He goes down there in a demonstration of solidarity, but what else did he do? I think, since the Russians don't want a wider war, he was kind of trying to figure out what form is this retaliation for those assassinations, and what form will Iran choose? And maybe it'd be better not to do the kind of thing that would cause a casus belli, where Netanyahu would find it easy to get the U.S. in with both feet. So I think there was a council of caution there. The Russians have a lot to lose here. So do the Chinese, if the especially with the Chinese, if the oil can't flow out of the Persian Gulf. And last but not least, the Russians and Iran are this far from having a new treaty 20-year treaty, I think it is, has been negotiated over the last 3 years. It's ready for signature now. Most people expect it to be signed at Kazan at the BRICS conference in October. And it's tantamount to a mutual defense treaty. It's sort of like the treaty that Russia has with China. It's not exactly a mutual defense treaty where each side is bound to come immediately to the help of the other, but it's just a tad short of that. Now, I imagine, this is pure speculation on my part. I imagine that treaty ready for signature. I'll bet that the Iranians said, "Hey, Mr. Shoigu, hey, let's do that now, huh? I mean, let's. I mean, this will really put a deterrent factor, really weighty one on the Americans and the Israelis." And Shoigu said, "No, we'll wait until the BRICS in October in Kazan." That's my guess, because the Russians don't want to give the Iranians the kind of carte blanche that the United States gives to Netanyahu. And maybe I'll leave it there.
Ray, the other thing that was so important was Turkey joining South Africa in that case of genocide against Israel. In your opinion, does it have any meaning for the Biden administration or even the Netanyahu administration?
Well, the Biden administration is tone deaf. The Netanyahu administration is just singularly focused on genocide and bringing the U.S. in if they go against Hezbollah. So Erdogan talks a good game, and he's quite willing to do demonstrative gestures like this. This is not as much as he could do. He could cut off all economic relations with Israel. My information is that a lot of oil still flows from Iran to Israel. He could do other things, like, for example, allow that ship that has been trying to get supplies to Gaza for a couple of months now, allow it to leave port, for God's sake. I have friends on that ship, or they used to be on that ship. They're probably home now. But, he won't even do that. So that would be a tangible demonstration of Turkey's willingness to cooperate and to do more than just rhetoric with respect to Israel. Now, the caveat here is that if there is a wider war, then we have the prospect of Turkey supporting Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran. Now, Turkey is a member of NATO. If the U.S. is involved militarily, would we have two NATO members fighting each other? I mean, it's strange beyond belief. Hopefully it won't come to that. But those are the equities involved here. I just hope, I have no guarantee that Blinken and Sullivan are smart enough to realize, wow, they're in this pretty deep. They ought to get out of it. And the way they get out of it is to tell Netanyahu, knock it off. No offensive against Hezbollah. We will not support you. Now, every now and then you get mealy-mouthed reports in the press, in the Western press. Here's one about a week ago. President Biden has told Netanyahu, look, go ahead this time, but this is the last time. Mind you, this is the last time I give you full carte blanche. Give me a break, okay? So, that's a subject of ridicule to the world that knows which end is up. The situation still exists where Israel has a stranglehold on Congress, on the White House, and unless that changes, unless people rise up now in reaction to what happened to Scott Ritter, who told it right, in reaction to all these other indignities that are happening here and there around the world, unless people rise up here and meet the occasion, it's not going to get any better anytime soon.
Ray, the other thing that was so important and unbelievable was this report on prisoners in Israel, that the Israeli soldiers were raping these prisoners. And in the media, in Channel 12 in Israel, they conducted a poll that showed majority of people are in favor of these type of activities. Can you understand what's going on in Israel? Majority in favor of genocide, right now in favor of rape. What's happening there? It's unbelievable.
Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. They've forgotten that part of the Hebrew scriptures, right? Vengeance is theirs. They're fixated on October 7th last year, the Hamas raid on Israel. They only know half the story because it was the Israeli forces that killed half of those people that were killed in those things. And so they're fixated on vengeance. And the degree of irrationality shows through in this brutality. And the fact that very often the New York Times will repeat legends, will repeat made-up stories by the Israelis, and have the President of the United States talk about beheaded babies, remember that? Or have the New York Times talk about the raping of women, Israeli women. Now, there's no proof of raping of Israeli women, but now we not only have these overt demonstrations about Israeli soldiers raping Palestinian prisoners, especially one, but there are reports that are credible that was live streamed to Ben-Gvir, one of the principal cabinet members. That's hard to believe, but look at what's coming out of his mouth, okay? So you get that, okay? Now, as the New York Times reported on that, I suppose that 2 weeks from now they'll say, well, there was these reports about rape and one person, but it wasn't really, they were using a broomstick. There's no broomstick, and let's go on to the, wow, So that's why they think they can get away with all this stuff. What else was I going to say? Just, well, it escapes you right now, and maybe that's enough on that one.
Thank you so much, Ray, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
You're most welcome. Nima.
See you soon, Ray.
Bye.